a follow-up of my progress in the subclavial steal syndrome diagnosis. I haven't really applied my mind to record and to keep track of time, but it's been about 3 years since I had the stent put in. The head surgeon at Auckland Hospital here in New Zealand said the back of my brain hadn't been getting blood for a very long time. Just a summary now of the situation, what occurred. A year after the stent was in and the vein was opened, my doctor showed me my before x-ray and my after x-ray of my head. My before as you may know, there are two main veins that go up the middle of each half of the brain. In my before x-ray, those two veins were a dull grey, just discernible from the rest of the brain matter in the x-ray. And my after x-ray, those two veins are white. And at 66 years old, I think I was, when I had the operation, I had that blockage, and talking to my family doctor, he said, I described an incident to him I had when I was in my early 30s. I had been sitting on my bed a long time. I don't recall if I had been lying down. I stood up and started to walk, and my sight disappeared. Just disappeared. I just could not see. My eyes quite open. Went back, sat down and realised, then some fear set in. I believe the Lord chose me this memory. I believe He's done this with me. He showed me four, I would say, great open visions in 2010, off the end of 2010, 4 open visions, about approximately 2 weeks apart, from October 15th, about October the 20th or 23rd, 2010, through to about the 14th of December. I don't recall the exact dates, but I did draw the open visions when I was seeing them. Pardon me. So this coming and going of my sight stayed with me about 10 minutes. I was in an upstairs room. I walked down the stairs. My sight disappeared again as I was going downstairs. Stairway was in an old house. The stairway was quite narrow. There was a handrail. And I think I even braved it to the point where I just let go of the handrail because I was so familiar with the stairs. I used to race down those stairs so fast. I think it was a thing my brothers may have taught me. I was the youngest of 2 brothers. My doctor said, if you had that experience at that age, you may well have had this blockage from birth. And that made a lot of sense to me, seeing the kinds of things I would remember about my childhood. Basically, when I was 5 years old, I remember finding myself in a cot, seeing basically for about the first time in my life, I think. That's how it seemed to me, and I didn't know. And I started crying. My mother came to the cot and she said, "Oh, what's the matter?" I think I might have been crying, might have cried a lot when I was a kid. And in my late 20s, my mum said to me, no, not my late 20s, about my early 40s, I think, or late 30s, my mum said, after my dad had died, my mum said, your father and I thought you were mongoloid, which today is Down syndrome, and we were going to commit you to a mental institution. And she was crying. I understood what she meant. I had actually spent some time in a mental institution. So basically, I've grown up without a memory until I'm 66 now. I notice my memory returning to me. It's quite funny. I would occupy myself with things to do, accumulate things. A lot of things I would set aside because I just couldn't complete the tasks. I managed to pick up some of those now, but the first thing that started happening to me was I basically stopped doing everything I was doing, and I began to realize I was doing my everyday things more efficiently and with more awareness. It was like the first time my memory had worked, from what I'm gathering now, that when I talk to people, doctor and so on, people at church and so on, I begin to understand what's been happening to me. Then I began to remember I was forgetting things, which to me was marvelous, because I'd never remembered I'd forgotten to do things. It was just like, anyway. And then I'd be aware that I was going to do something I actually found out I didn't need to do. That was another experience. And now I've spent, well, the four open visions of 2010, I spent many of those years in Christian chats. Quite a good situation for me, I begin to understand, because I'm not demanded of anything there. I can basically do as I please in Bible study or listening to people talk about Jesus and God. And in that time period, it's 2010, 12, 13 years, or nearly 13 years now, minus about 4 years where I started going to church more regularly, and through COVID I spent about 5 years away from Christian chats. But I did learn to understand about Jesus and God, and I believe I had a spiritual guide to help me there, whereas because I understand I didn't have a properly functioning memory all that time. So now it's recovery. As a Christian, I can say I didn't miss out on any prodigal son experiences. I just didn't have the mind to comprehend what I was doing. That's been no excuse, I don't think. I think I've been faced with the same challenges and tasks as a person with an ordinary blood flow to the brain, as it were, normally functioning memory. And now I'm in November, I'm Christian. November, December last year, of course I'm Christian because I've seen these 4 open visions. I knew they had to be from God. My brother would take me to church in my younger years, my later 20s, oh man, my mind's gone completely blank. Just excited, really, just entering into life, finding like apparently I still have blockages. I believe I have some around the heart area. I feel a shortness of breath. If I'm talking for a long time, like just then, I have to stop speaking and take in a breath. Now I'm finding that speaking through this, I can actually speak through this shortness of breath, or speak over it, where there's still the part of my life that can't speak while I'm trying to draw breath through the other blockages in my chest, I believe, around my heart probably. My doctor can talk to me about that in the future. I still don't doubt that Jesus can heal that. I believe he shows me things that help me believe that he will do that, but I can report on that later. Just very happy to realise and to understand about myself, which I believe was being relatively easy for me because of my introduction to the understanding of God through Jesus, how that truth has helped me to face things and look at things as they really are, which I believe is what the truth does with us. It directs us to what things what things really are. And this all begins in our lives, in the spiritual understanding of God and sending his Son into the world, through seeing ourselves as we really are, through believing in Jesus Christ. I can look back through that and I can understand how that has worked in my life. I think that's wonderful. His name shall be called wonderful. And just looking forward to progress and improvements in my health and in my lifestyle as I learn to understand myself better, and very grateful for this opportunity to even say something. Thank you. And Jesus is the Lord. Jesus is the Lord. Yeah. The first and only one to have been resurrected from death. Well, the first one, I believe the disciples will have been resurrected from death because they followed exactly what he did, and they died martyrs' deaths like Jesus, although Jesus was the very first of all to have done this and was prophesied throughout the Old Testament. So he's believable because the truth about him is written in a book, the records of his life and the things he'd done, and those of us who and we're told we should believe in him, and we can find out that that's actually real and true, and continue on with him for the going on unto perfection. We have an eternal God who's perfect. We can never know everything like God does, but we can go on unto that perfection eternally until we know as much as God will allow us to know, and that knowledge goes out into the world and is used by the world, and the world improves itself and very slowly improves in its knowledge and longevity of life and the spiritual understanding that's always meant to have been, that takes us all to that same place. I almost want to say Mike Free, habit from Christian Chats, the end. I'll do another update later when I stumble across my records of my recordings. Thank you.